For nearly 10 years, I taught Japanese at a British university in the adult education program, where the students are not 20-year-olds, but adults, doctors, engineers, retired teachers, people with full lives learning Japanese in the evening because they love Japan. And here's the honest truth. Over those 10 years, the person who learned the most in that classroom was probably me. Because almost everything we are told about adults learning a language, you need talent, you need to be young, you need strong discipline, turned out to be simply not true in that classroom. Today, I want to share the three biggest things my adult students taught me, how adults really learn, what they are really looking for, and what actually stands in their way. If you are adult learning Japanese or wondering whether you still can, I think at least one of these will quietly change something for you. Konnichiwa, I'm Asuka. I studied linguistics at the University of Tokyo, then education, then took a PhD in psychology. But what I'm sharing today didn't come from any of those. It came from a classroom in the UK and from the adult students who came to it year after year. So, what is an adult learner really? The answer I found is very different from what I expected when I started. Let me take you through it. If you like this kind of honest look at language learning, subscribing is very welcome. Let's begin. 1. A different kind of learner. The first lesson took me years to see, and it changed how I teach. Adults kept apologizing to me for their memory. I'm so slow with vocabulary, Asuka. My son picks those words up instantly. And it's true, a 20-year-old often memorize a word less faster. But watch what happens after that, because this is where it gets interesting. My adult students asked questions younger learners rarely asked. Not just, what does this word mean? But why do Japanese people say it this way? When we learned how to offer food to a guest, for example, they wanted to understand the feeling behind the phrase, the relationship inside it. They connected every new expression to something. A trip to Kyoto, a novel they'd read, a Japanese colleague they remembered. And that kind of learning sticks, not because adults have better memories, they don't, but because they are not really collecting words. They are building understanding. A young learner often memorizes faster, an adult learner often understands deeper. Two different kinds of mind, each with its own strengths. So, if you've been treating your age as a handicap, try this reframe. You are not a worse version of a young learner. You are a different kind of learner. Remember this one, the meaning-seeking mind. It's the key to everything else I saw. 2. The moment that kept them coming back. Here's the second lesson, my favorite one. If you'd asked me at the start what my students wanted, I'd have said to speak Japanese fluently. It seems obvious, but over the years, I noticed something more specific and more beautiful. The moments my adult students' eyes lit up were almost never about getting an answer right. They lit up when a Japanese word gave them a feeling that English had never quite given them. When they understood, for the first time, why a Japanese person bows at the end of a phone call. When a single expression let them sense how a Japanese friend might actually see a situation. In those moments, they weren't studying a language anymore. They were stepping into another way of seeing the world and finding, to their surprise, that something in them responded to it. That was what they'd really come for. The vocabulary was a doorway. What they were really looking for was on the other side. Once I understood this, I stopped teaching Japanese as a pile of materials to memorize and started teaching it as what it really is, a way of seeing the world. The atmosphere of my classes changed, word spread, the courses filled up, then developed waiting lists, and eventually the university did something that still moves me. They named the course Learn Japanese with Asuka. It was a great honor to be given such an opportunity. This experience taught me something important. When adults are taught as adults, depth first, meaning first, they don't just keep up, they flourish. 3. What actually stands in the way? Now, after everything I've just said, you might expect that these wonderful learners had it easy. They didn't. And this is the third lesson, the hardest one. Even my most devoted students, the ones with the meaning seeking minds, the ones whose eyes lit up, struggled to continue. And when others struggle to continue, they almost always blame the same two things, their age and their memory. But from the front of the classroom, that is not what I saw. What I saw was much simpler. Think about what a university student's day looks like. Learning is their day. Lectures, reading, revision, the whole day is built around it. Now look at an adult's day. Work, family, responsibilities. An adult doesn't give their day to learning. They give what is left of it. An evening hour, maybe, a tired one. Yet most language courses are still built as if every learner had a student schedule. Come every week, keep the pace, review at home. The course assumes a life that adults simply don't have. That mismatch, not age, not memory, is what actually stops adult learners. So what do adults do? Many quietly give up on classes and turn to the other option. Apps, textbooks, self-study. Something flexible, something that fits the gaps in a busy day. And here is a quiet problem with that. Remember lesson 1 and lesson 2. Apps and textbooks are built for one kind of learning, correcting words, filling in blanks, memorizing. But the adult mind is hungry for something more. The why behind the phrase, the way of seeing behind the word. So after a few months, something starts to feel like it isn't enough. Nothing is wrong exactly. It's just not what you came for. So the adult learner ends up caught in between. The classroom doesn't fit their life. The app doesn't feed their mind. And that in between place is where most adult Japanese journeys quietly end, through not fault of the learner at all. So, 3 lessons from 10 years. Adults learn differently, deeper, not worse. What adults really want isn't a test score. It's a new way of seeing the world. And what stops adult was never age or talent. It's that almost nothing out there is actually built for an adult life and an adult mind at the same time. I couldn't stop thinking about that in-between problem. Eventually, I left the university and built my own school to answer it. I've told that story in another video if you are curious. But here's the direction of the answer in one line. The learning has to fit into your life instead of forcing your life to fit around the learning. And it has to feed the meaning-seeking mind, not just memory. What does that look like in practice? I've laid that whole approach out in a free online seminar. Why busy adults struggle to keep going, why memorizing more is not the answer, and the learning method I built from these 10 years. You'll find the link in the description. Please remember, If you've struggled with Japanese before, it's very likely wasn't you who failed. You were simply caught between two options that were never built for both your life and your mind. And there is a third way. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. さようなら.